Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake. I'm an author and robot, and today we're doing the first video of the month, Lemoy time. So before we get started, at number one, if you like what I do on this channel and you would like to see more, hit the like, subscribe, and comment so you get, Also, I love with Lemoy if you let me know what your favorite short story was, because, that's the joy of having, especially when there's more than one. Number two, if you would like to be featured on this channel, check out the links in the description for Lemoy and Fresh Meat Feature, two different ways that I try to feature indies or up-and-coming writers on this channel in two very different ways. And number three, if you're looking to get your hands on my upcoming book, also there are links for that in the description below. Currently, ARC's available until the end of April. Yeah, and the cover is going to be lit. So, the full paperback cover, that is. It's so good. I'm so excited to get my own paperback cover. So, that said, I am doing the lazy day today. Clearly, we've just got the normal background set up. I didn't want to pull out the screen. So we just got an explosion, a killer, a skull, a couple of skulls, and a cat to go along with our theme of resurrection, revival, or the end of a life. However that was to be interpreted by you guys. So let's get started. The first story is by S.A. Young, titled Breath Among the Fog. It had just happened a week ago, and she was running. Eleanor Grisby, her face etched with lines of 60 years, sharp eyes looking out of the red-rimmed glasses, arrived at a train station in a tremendous hurry. She checked her watch, 11:45. She had 15 minutes before the alluring steam engine would leave. Behind her, the Grand Rail entrance bid her adieu as the darkness gripped its decaying corners. Eleanor's simple black heels clacked against the stone flooring as her hastily packed suitcase bounced along behind her. She approached the ticket counter wherein a bored young man read his comic behind a pane of glass, waiting for his shift to end. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, struggling to keep her voice even. The boy grunted, refusing to look up. How fucking rude, Eleanor thought. I need a ticket. He set his comic down with a slap and an eye roll. "Where to?" Eleanor rapped her manicured nails on the counter. "Rowstone." The boy sighed, lazily checking his computer. "That'll be 40. Good." Eleanor resisted the urge to let her voice bite. She opened her purse with adrenalized hands and handed her fare. Just then, her phone buzzed in the pocket of her jacket. Eleanor refused to pick up the call. Instead, she snatched the ticket and walked away with shaking determination. The train's engine gave a warning blare. 13 minutes. Eleanor boarded the train and shuffled past the crowded carriages. She resisted the urge to think. The memory was too heavy. Instead, she walked numbly past the chattering families and couples until she came to a final carriage, mercifully empty. She put her luggage in the overcarry and sat on the purple cushioned seat, watching her breathe fog against the cold window. She continued to stare at her own reflection with watering eyes and only noticed the figure when they moved to sit directly across from her. Eleanor quickly wiped her coming tears and looked up to give a stranger a passing smile. Her breath caught in her chest. "Hi, Mom," her daughter said, adjusting her black-framed glasses. "Where are you going?" Eleanor stared at Rose for a moment. Black hair that fell to her shoulders, blue hoodie and jeans. It's the same. She's the same, Eleanor thought. But that wasn't quite true. There was something different about Rose now. Normally, she was fidgety and a little hyper. She used to always bounce her leg or drum on her thighs, and now she sat still and calm. Eleanor's chest welled as an onslaught of metal butterflies smashed against her stomach. "It's going away," Eleanor said, her words shaking. She forced her gaze back to the window. "You can't stop me." "What about Dad?" Rose asked, her voice even. "Oh, he'll be fine," Eleanor said, pushing the image of his weathered face from her mind. "Now go, please. It's leaving soon, and I doubt that you bought a ticket. Not like you could." Her voice cracked. "Is this really necessary?" Rose asked. The train blared a third warning. 7 minutes. Eleanor grimaced, feeling the engine of her heart pick up. "I don't have to talk to you just because you're here." Eleanor took a shuddering breath. I know how things work. I know what you're doing. It won't work. It can't." "Mother," Rose began. Eleanor felt the slightest change in the air as Rose leaned forward in her peripheral. Eleanor did her best to avoid Rose's piercing gaze. but found herself unable to resist. She looked into her daughter's eyes, still green, just as she remembered. "Mother, I need you to go home. We're all worried about you." "Absolutely not. You can't run like this," Rose continued, her voice soft and quiet. "I'm sorry. I really am, but you can't. I'll follow you, you know." "Don't you dare," Eleanor spat, immediately regretting the venom that etched the corners of her mouth. Rose's eyes glistened as she leaned back again with an imperceptible sigh. "Where are you going, then?" Rose asked. Eleanor wrapped her fingers on her arm, frustrated. She felt the sudden urge to smash the window. "Rowstone." "Rowstone? I think I remember that name," Rose said. Eleanor nodded. "We took you there on vacation when you were little. You loved the beach, especially the crab shells." Eleanor smiled, briefly allowing the memory of little Rose in her pink boots searching along the wet sand for little treasures to keep. It flowed down her throat like warm, smooth liquor. "I always liked crabs," Eleanor heard Rose say. The mother looked to her daughter. The dam was breaking. "It's not fair," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. Rose stayed silent, her hands placed delicately in her lap. "It's not fair," Eleanor repeated as her voice broke. The tears came in a slow shower, filling her eyes and fogging her glasses. Rose shimmered in her vision. Eleanor Grisby's daughter knelt in the center of the carriage. She reached out, gently cupping her mother's cheek. Her hand was cold and familiar. "No, it's not fair," Rose said. "But do what you can, all the same." She smiled as Rose always smiled, with that radiance and youth, but with a certain sadness in her eyes. The train blared its final horn. 2 minutes. Wait. Eleanor felt it coming. Seconds. Are you? Rose kissed her mother's forehead softly before sitting next to her mother. She placed her head on Eleanor's shoulder. "Yeah, Mom. There's plenty of crab." Eleanor kissed the top of her daughter's head with a choking laugh. Rose stayed where she was for a moment longer, her hands on top of her mother before fading away like a cold breath of fog. "All the same," Eleanor choked, speaking into the quiet. "Excuse me," a brisk voice interrupted her peace. She turned her head to the obtuse man, holding the hand of a delicate child as she played mindlessly with a doll. A man pointed across from Eleanor. "Is anyone sitting there?" Eleanor stood up. "No, nobody is," she said, smiled at the child who gave a grin and walked past the small family, through lively chattering carriages and stepped off the train. Eleanor's phone buzzed against her side. She pulled the phone out of her pocket and answered without hesitation. "Hello, darling. I'm coming home." Ghost stories just have a thing, and it might just be because Body More made me more appreciative. Like, I've always loved ghost stories. I've got ghost stories over here for like days, but there is such a mood here, and you go with the fast, and then the slow, and that pacing was very nice. A lot of heart in this piece. Mr. or Miss Sean. Let's see, Sean. Mr. Young. The next story is by Tim WritesAndStuff. The small second-floor apartment was dimly lit by the light of the moon pouring in through the 4 large windows of the living room. Michael Harper stood in the center of this room, wondering at how this new, familiar space suddenly seemed to him. The sky outside had not gone wholly dark just yet. No, rather, it was the perfect shade between midnight and Prussian blue, which was emblematic of the late evenings of Pennsylvanian autumn. Michael loved the way the sky looked this time of year. He always had. Movement caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. It was here again. It never left. This single thought crossed Michael's mind as he pulled his right hand from his pocket and held it up to his eye. There was a slight terror, mostly his fingers. It would have been barely perceptible to anyone else, but Michael saw it as clearly as he could see the first stars beginning to shine in the rapidly darkening sky outside his window. "I need a drink." Except he didn't. He wanted a drink, sure, but he didn't need a drink. "Okay, fine. I want a drink. And I want it really freaking bad, okay? And I want it really freaking badly. Better?" He would always speak meanly to himself when he felt a craving coming on. It was not necessarily for the drink itself, rather it was for the small escape from reality that the drink offered. He only felt like this when he was alone. But that wasn't exactly right either. He was alone plenty, and he felt like this maybe half of the time. "I feel like this when I'm lonely, not when I'm alone." That was the difference. Standing in the middle of his ever-darkening living room, alone, but not really alone, as the continued glances of movement from corner of his eyes made him aware. Michael confirmed with himself that his desire for a brief reprieve from his lifelong nightmare called reality really only showed itself when he felt alone. And right now, with the things in the dark stalking him, from just barely within the field of vision, Michael felt more alone than ever. With a grunt and a sigh, he slid his hand back into the warmth of his pocket and turned toward the doorway, which would lead him from the living room to the hallway, and from there to the second floor, which would bring him outside. He wanted some air. He had once again moved his hand from his pocket, this time the left one, and hovered it at the light switch for more than a moment. Michael decided against flicking it. The idea of filling the room with its yellow artificial light seemed almost repugnant, and he didn't like what he might see if he brought everything into full and escapable view. His hand again slipped into his pocket. He was painfully aware of what he was doing with his hands, with his whole body. His gait felt unnatural, and he was aware of his breathing, now purposeful rather than automatic. He could feel the weight of his tongue in his mouth, how the tip pressed against the sides of his teeth before pulling away, suspended and collecting in a pool of saliva that he gulped back and down his throat. Behind him it lurked, that hateful thing that was always with him. It knows I'm uncomfortable. Indeed, it did, and his thoughts, one of the more smoldering despairs rather than passionate fears or unbridled anger. He would feel those emotions too, sometimes, not tonight. Tonight, he just felt sorry for himself. It was the one-man pity party, and he had forgotten to bring the refreshments. The sounds of passing motorists greeted Michael. He opened the front door and made his way out onto the balcony, which served as his porch. The air had a chill to it, another sign of autumn being in full swing. It was almost cold enough to be biting, but not just yet. Down below, he could see dead leaves being pushed along the sidewalk in the swirling wind. More cars passed by, their lights illuminating the road ahead of them and the various buildings lining the street to the left and right of his own. The street lamps hadn't come on just yet, though it was dark enough now that all but the dimmest of stars could be seen overhead. The open space of the outside world felt good to Michael. It's almost like there was more than just my mind on the inside of my apartment. Behind him, a light scratching could be heard coming from the door to his apartment. It liked to mess with him like that. Noises, small, sudden appearances. The only time Michael ever got a full view of it was when he would awaken at night, semi-conscious and unable to move. Sleep paralysis is what it was called in the various internet searches on the topic. Visions of a dark figure with glowing red eyes and a smile that he couldn't see, but that he knew was there. He just absolutely, positively, 100% knew that it was smiling at him as he struggled with all of his might, but in vain, to move some piece of him. Any piece, even the arm, even his fingers or his toesies, which it might have nibbled on had he woken up just a split second later. Anything, only to disappear the moment he regained his ability to move, leaving him alone. But not alone, sometimes alone and lonely, sitting on his bed, covered in a cold sweat and gasping for air. He could almost hear the tingling of laughter in those moments. Maybe tingling wasn't exactly the right word. The laughter would be soft, menacing and predatory, but paper-thin and yet throaty and clangorous. Now the story goes on for like 2,300 words total, but since the rules of this are up to 1,000 words, I'm cutting this off there. Unfortunately, y'all are going to miss out on the whole second half of this short story, but go follow Tim if you want the rest of it, because I'm following the rules. And naughty on you for not following the rules, Tim. But aside from that, very nice descriptions, very nice mood. Like, it does feel claustrophobic in a way for me, and it does have a lot of emotional intensity behind it. I wish I could share the rest of this, but rules be rules, man. But there is a lot of emotion here, and the description making it so personal. The next story is by Charles Robertson. If there be aught left of a man what casted the spell, or the woman what he also casted it onto, I know not. Such a mind as that of the Homo sapien lacks the capabilities to withhold the memories of our time. Our fleshes have lived, as well as our own minds, very well proved. Each and every memory is destined to be eroded away by the waves of time, just as every cell of flesh is to be, yet my flesh remains, but my memories fade, for every being replaced by newer ones, though the old is not washed away in chronology, creating a maze of bewilderment within my own mind, and presumably hers too. I know not even my true name, not hers, nor if either should be entitled to such names as the persons that once resided within our fleshes no longer be. But I do believe the man that resided within mine truly loved the woman that resided within hers, ere the man quite foolishly played with powers beyond his understanding, and has now cursed the man and woman that reside within the fleshes as the current. Two strangers forced to be with one another, as all the rest of the world is an alien entity. Our minds are too ancient to blend with. Of course, if the man and woman that once were within these fleshes have died, that would mean the present she and I, too, may eventually die, but never in flesh, as new persons are forced to live the curse of immortality. I would end the curse if I knew a way, but I have no memory of the spell itself, only that one was casted, and thus have naught to work with. Some peace do I take that the man did, for whatever spared his children this curse, and his bloodline are granted the gift of death, though she and I may never even seek them for companionship, for the generations have passed so many times, as I can tell them the great changes in the aesthetic and technology of the world that I can see through my shattered memories, that our blood would no longer relate, our faces not be alike, and the family name the persons before us once had may no longer exist, and thus I await for time eternal alongside my wife by flesh and perhaps law, but stranger by mind, as our persons wither, but our flesh remains for life eternal. This either feels like an epilogue or a prologue for something that's then going to go into the lives of these people that he's talking about, or the many lives of these people that he's talking about. There's a very distinct voice to this that does like a mummy in a sarcophagus or something, or a grave, or some sort of god being kind of put, basically still alive, but being in a grave. But there's the distinct voice is always the stuff that stands out to me. If you hear ding, 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 it's because he's moving around, pushing his ball around. The next story is by Egao Chan. It was in a closed-up room, and Lee was standing over a dead body. This was the body of a young man who had a number of grievous, still bleeding wounds on his body. His face, his shoulders, his forearms, and his throat. The young man's fingers were bloodied and torn to pieces of skin, and flesh remained in his fingernails. On the ground beside this young man were two eyeballs, with the nerves torn and the surface scratched. And he also saw the one that tormented this dead young man, the young woman in her red dress, though she was just standing there without even a hint of emotions. Lee could sense the cold aura radiating from her. She was just there, looking at the young man lying in front of her, and as if the bloody death scene did not bother her at all. The next moment, the woman in red looked up at Lee with a dry and somewhat fake-looking grin on his face. Her mouth was a crescent shape, but her eyes remained the same as they were, emotionless and staring straight, unflinching and unblinking. "We can finally be together." This seemed like the first time Lee heard this woman speak, but somehow it sounded very familiar. "You can see me now, can't you? You can. Feel my presence entirely, and not just see me as a shadow?" Lee nodded, absent-mindedly, as the woman in red walked step by step toward him, her bare feet leaving trails of bloody footprints behind. "You told me that I was pretty." The woman in red walked closer and closer to Lee. "You told me that we would be together forever, and you'd never change." As the woman came closer, the skin on her face dried up and peeled off piece by piece, and her eyeballs withered like two pieces of rotten fruit placed inside of two hollowed eye sockets. There was a rough crescent-shaped bruise gradually being revealed on this woman's neck. Before Lee could do anything, his hands were grabbed by her and placed on her neck, with his fingers right on the bruises, almost perfectly covering it up. His vision completely went out, leaving him with only an excruciating pain radiating from both sides of his nose. Lee could also feel his face burning and aching as he could feel the blood pouring down onto his face. "Now we're together." The woman's voice became hoarse, as if air was trying to come out from her lungs but couldn't. "Now you can tell me that I'm pretty all day long because I am. You just can't tell." These were the last words Lee heard before he felt himself being dragged away. Another ghost story. It's so creepy. The details of this, the pacing of this was so nice, and it was sharp. The narration of this was sharp, which helped with the tension and helped with the directness of the spook here. You got a lot of detail in the scene, giving a very distinct picture without it going on. Very nice. The next story is by RSAlessi. Xander awoke with a taste of vomit in his mouth, the smell of it too. He cracked his eyes open. Brilliant sunlight sent skittering pain deep into his brain. An electric riff that played off the dull bass already throbbing inside of his skull. Shutting his eyes, he groaned. Probably best that he didn't try that again. Gradually, he became aware of the spring poking into his side. This bed wasn't his. His mattress was made of memory foam, the good stuff from Sweden, 100% free of springs, which meant that he passed out in a stranger's bed. Again. He wriggled onto a more comfortable position. He'd sort everything out once he slept his hangover off, except he couldn't fall back asleep. His head hurt and his throat was dry. Water? A voice suggested, a male voice. That was unusual for Xander, but his drunk ass had done crazier things. Sure, he said. The words came out hoarse and slurred. Damn. He was still drunk. Cautious of his headache, he reached blindly for the promised beverage. Strong hands hoisted him upright to set the cup against his lips. You're a mess. Gulping down mouthful after sweet mouthful of water, he nodded. I found you outside, choking on your own vomit. Pushed you onto your side, but it was like you had a death wish. You kept rolling onto your back, so I brought you in. You owe me your life. Lucky as a cat. That's what his friends said about him, though he must be down to the last one of his 9 lives by now. Aspirin? He swallowed the pills placed on his tongue and cautiously opened his eyes. Standing over him was a man as wide as he was tall, but not fat, but rather broad-shouldered and barrel-chested with a full beard, flannel shirt, and loose jeans held up by leather suspenders. Name's John, the man said, and you're Alexander. I checked your ID before you woke up. Looked up your criminal record, too. Never can be too careful. You've racked up a lot of drunken disorderlies. Xander grinned. Yeah, they have to charge me with something to put me in the dunk tank, which is where you should have been last night. Instead, I found you. John tossed Xander his jeans. Come on, time to get up. Xander hauled himself out of bed and stepped into his jeans. Did I make a mess? 'Cause if I did, I can clean it up. Nah, you're good. I put you in the tub with a bucket and sat with you until you were done. Xander followed John into the hall. A rich, smoky aroma greeted him. Bacon. His stomach stirred, hunger or nausea, he wasn't sure, but he was ready to find out. John led him to the kitchen. Waiting on the counter were 2 plates piled high with scrambled eggs, bacon, and butter. Settling onto a stool, he scanned the room. Standard apartment fare. It was clean and tidy, the kitchen overlooking a living room, and a short hall leading to a couple of bedrooms, and a bathroom. The decor was cheap and bland, particle board and plastic, carpet and linoleum. Nice place, he said, because he ought to say something. John shoveled forkfuls of food into his mouth. Xander scooped some scrambled eggs onto his fork and nibbled on it. Barely undercooked, it was light and creamy, just the way he liked it, and perfectly salted with a hint of butter, no pepper. He stabbed a bigger chunk. You owe me your life. Huh? The last scrape of scrambled egg evaded Xander's fork. He chased them down before he looked up. John was watching him. I saved your life last night. I suppose you did. Thank you. And I gave you hospitality. Xander reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. Are you asking for money? John's face twisted. You insult me. Xander lifted his hands. No, man, I just don't see where you're coming from with this. John squared his broad shoulders. I saved your life, and now it belongs to me. I give you 2 choices. 1, I take your life now, or 2, you serve me for a year and a day. Xander blinked. Are you serious? Yes. Murder or slavery, if that's what you'd like to call it. That's what it is, and it's against the law. John leaned in close. His smile revealed a row of unusually sharp teeth. By your rules, maybe, but not mine. You can't just... I can. I've been doing things this way for a long time, and nobody's stopped me yet. Xander glanced toward the door. If only he could... A heavy hand grabbed his arm. Try to escape, and you default to option 1. Right. He wet his lips. Tell me, what can I expect from options 1 and 2? John's grin widened. His eyes caught the light and glowed like they were lit from within. It doesn't work that way, buddy. Choose and find out. Xander checked the door again. It was close, but John was closer. Murder or slavery? Not slavery. You'll serve me for a year and a day. The choice was obvious. Servitude would give him time to plan an escape and report the situation to the authorities. Still, he didn't like the way John was leering at him. If I choose to serve you, can I change my mind later? Go with option 1? You're smart. I'm a lawyer. So am I. John offered his hand, and I see that you've made up your mind. Let's shake on it. Service to me for a year and a day, with the right to change your mind. Xander presented his hand. John cut into it with something, a knife, a claw, and shook firmly. Blood dripped into the ivory carpet beneath them, scarlet testament to their pact. Excellent, John said. His teeth were sharper now, and his eyes were definitely glowing. Let us begin. Is this Irish, John? Should I have read this all with an Irish accent? However, the best I could have kept it. It always gets a little bit high, so I'm almost feeling like that would be a little bit too much for John to have. But is this the Irish John the Vampire? Also, yeah, this just feels like the start, like not even the start of something, like the inciting incident of something. Obviously, something before this, but this could be the start of something as well, I guess. Yeah. It's very RSAlessi. I love your style of writing specifically. The dialogue, the quippy back and forth, there's a very naturalness with the way these characters interact when you like really work on a scene. I think you mentioned that you thought it was sloppy. Maybe I'm associating that with a different piece that you were mentioning, but I don't. The next story is by Wraith. Blackness, an endless, formless abyss surrounds me. I drift through it, not having the faintest idea where I am, where I was, where I'm going. I should be terrified, but for some reason, the feeling is familiar. Wait, I feel? It seems strange to feel anything. A moment, or perhaps an eternity ago, there was nothing. Not even the emptiness around me. I was nothing. What am I now? The void seems to fold in on itself, and a light appears in the distance. I drift toward it, reaching out with a strange compulsion. The light shifts downward, and I feel myself falling. Images float through what I realize is my mind. A stone chamber, a circle of men, strange symbols drawn on the floor. I struggle to understand what any of it means, but for a moment, it all becomes irrelevant as a single pivotal thought comes to me. I live again. My eyes open, and I gasp for air as if I've held my breath for a century. I'm lying on my back, on what I can only perceive as a hard surface. Dim light and muddled shapes fill the blurry vision, and a hollow ringing floods my ears. Cool air touches my skin. Skin? Yes. Flesh, blood, and bone, as I was once. He lives, says a nearby voice. Praise be, says another. We've done it. Yes. Voices. Speaking in the tongue I once knew. I feel a hand on my shoulder. I struggle to move away, but my mobility is much slower to return than my senses. Easy there, says a voice in my ear. There are whispers around us, no doubt from those who spoke a moment ago. I know I am not alone, but I do not know how many others are here with me. Do you remember? Asks the one next to me. I struggle to understand him. He repeats the question. My throat struggles to form words. The hall? Up high? Yes, says the voice next to me. What else? My forefathers greeted me, did they? But he appeared. The one. He did, the voice breathed. Truly? He told me to return. Yes, that's it. You left us, but you were sent back. My vision at last clears, and the dimly lit stone chamber takes shape before me. Several men stand in what I assume is a circle with me at the center. I turn my head to see an old man kneeling beside me. He's dressed in a dark robe that matches the others, and he's holding an odd-looking staff in his free hand. Please, forgive us. In any other circumstance, we would have been content to let you rest, to revere you as you so deserve, but I gather myself enough to ask a rather burning question. What do you mean by this? The old man looks me in the eyes, and in him I sense many things: grief, anger, desperation, determination, and a fire of the soul that my own spirit recognizes, flaring up in hopes to meet him as equal. We still need you. Ooh, is this a god? Is this a dead man? Is this a resurrection? This is actually a resurrection. But what is the holy war that they need this man for? This does feel like a holy war style thing. Sorry, my hand is like acting like it's feeling asleep. What do they need this man for? A lot of intrigue in this. Also, the intrigue. I'm trying to place where I think this lands. Like narrative style. A lot, very introspective. And very straight at the same time. A good intro to what's like, that would be, I could see that as a prologue. The next story is by Aeternis. Stop. Everything around Monica Prescott froze, though she briefly appreciated that this stopped the masked figure standing over her from plunging 3 feet of gleaming blade through her chest and onto the earth below. She'd long since learned to fear the string of failure more than the pain of simulated wounds caused by simulated lasers, railguns, blades, and explosions. What am I supposed to do? Monica gestured up at the frozen figure. He's faster than me. He is not faster than you. Horus materialized just out of arm's reach, sitting cross-legged on the floor. You just aren't using your implants correctly. Monica rolled away from the frozen opponent and got to her feet, glaring at her tutor. Why the Project Juno instructor appeared to his pupils in a dream sim as a balding, pudgy little middle-aged man was far from clear. Most likely his appearance was chosen by the project scientists purely to be as far from the standard mold of military instructor as possible. You don't believe me? Horus smiled, arching one eyebrow. Monica hated his smug, high-pitched voice, but his dream sims were his domain. She couldn't be rid of him without leaving them, and she couldn't leave the dream sims until the med techs were done rebuilding her shredded body to match her simulated capabilities. It doesn't matter if you give him exactly the same settings as you gave me. Monica shook her fist at the simulated opponent. He's controlled by a computer. He's always going to be faster. Huh. Horus's dark eyes twinkled in that playful way that always spelled trouble. Perhaps an adjustment is in order. I have reduced the reaction speed of your simulated augments by 20% to compensate. Begin again. Reduced? What? Everything around Monica went dark. When the diffused light returned, she was standing at the center of bare gray earth, and not even the footprints of her previous bout with the simulated enemy remained. A blade stood buried, point first, in the dirt at her feet. Are you kidding, Horus? Monica snatched up her weapon and whirled in place, wondering where the masked figure would come from this time. I'm going to get stabbed. Again. And again and again until you learn what you are capable of. Horus's disembodied voice seemed to float down from the darkness above. Play nice now. Snarling, Monica turned just in time to see the black-clad figure sidling along the edge of the circle of light. Not wanting to endure yet another simulated evisceration, she knew from first-hand experience that it wasn't as painful as the real thing, but it still hurt quite a lot. She dropped into a low crouch. If she couldn't be faster than her opponent, she knew that she'd have to let him come to her. With a flash of light off gleaming, deadly dark blade, the figure leaped forward, crossing 4 meters of simulated dirt in a single standing jump. Monica rolled to one side, and the blade hissed through the air where she had just been. Already she felt sluggish. She avoided the cut by only a few centimeters, and she swung her own blade at the figure's knees. He effortlessly stepped back, blade whirling, to bat hers away. He effortlessly stepped back, blade whirling to bat hers away. What in the hell? Monica dove backward to avoid a potentially beheading slice. She didn't know what it would feel like to have her head cut off in a dream sim, and she didn't want to. What am I supposed to do? Horus laughed, his high-pitched giggle setting Monica's teeth on edge. Stop fighting like a fencer and start fighting like a Juno. Monica parried her assistant's blade and pushed him back, but before she could follow up, he spun out of the way and stepped back. At least Horus hadn't dialed her down in strength along with speed. Helpful. As the black-clad figure advanced again, Monica swung her blade in a high arc, aiming to slash his face with its tip. Though her arms reacted with what felt like a ponderous slowness, the blade blurred in motion in front of her, still moving several times faster than a normal human could have swung it. Her opponent brought up his blade and deflected it just in time. Think of it like a game of chess. Have you ever played this game, correct? Monica cocked her head in confusion, then scrambled to avoid being cut to pieces as her opponent redoubled his assault. In a game of chess, the speed of each move does not matter. It matters only that the move made is the right one. Monica leapt over her opponent's head, her feet easily clearing the edge of his blade as he slashed up at her and landed behind him. At least it should have been behind him. By the time her feet hit the dirt, it was several meters away, safely out of reach. You do not understand the powers being trusted to you, not yet. A Juno is more than strength and speed. A Juno plays chess when their opponents, well, they think they are fencing. Monica glared at the masked figure opposing her, still not understanding what Horace was getting at. She knew from their pre-op briefing that artificial capabilities she had been given went far further than strength and speed, but most of the rest hardly seemed relevant to swordplay. In any case, Horace had disabled simulation of most of them for the current exercise. Clearly, he wasn't talking about the various clever technological tricks included in the Juno package. This time, as the figure advanced once more, Monica parried cautiously, watching its behavior. Though absurdly fast and strong, the masked man was still being simulated as a physical being. It could only make one move at once. If it extended to the left, it was exposed on the right, and it took a fraction of a second to slow down the motion of its arms and the weapons to change to another maneuver. If she had a second blade and the ability to split her attention between them seamlessly. Now, you're going to get blue-balled, because this one also went over 1,000. So, if you want to know how it ends, you better go and follow Aeternis, because you guys are being naughty this month. But action scene. There's great world building in this. The action flows. It's not overly. And you get a good vibe of the relationship between Horace and Monica. And also already the idea, well, that Monica is new to whatever is happening. Like, this isn't a typical training thing, because it feels more like she's being introduced into something that she only recently joined. She mentioned that sort of when she mentioned the pre-op briefing. So she's just entering something. So this gives me the feeling that this is very early on in a larger sci-fi story. Let me know if I'm wrong or what vibes you get. And lots of action in this bit, which tells me there's probably going to be a lot of action later. Like, this is a very specific, also this is a very specific sort of thing, the learn to use the chess instead of fencing, which makes me think it's going to come up later in the bigger story of how this is going to develop and some important aspect that she has to apply in action that she learned here with her big bad enemy. So that's what I'm thinking. So those are the stories for the month of April. Thank you to everybody for submitting and letting me read them on the channel. And anybody listening, let me know what your thoughts are on them. Which was your favorite down in the comments below. If you like any of these authors and want to check out more of their work, all of them will be linked in the description with whatever social media they want to lead you guys to or means of connection. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, authors, for the new creative content, and I think that's all. So have a great week, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?